Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Discover New Music podcast from us at Pelt Music. I hope you had a great Christmas and you're looking forward to the new year. We're starting things off with a chat with Little Triggers, who we featured recently over on our Discover New Music playlist on Spotify with their single Personality Crisis. Before then, though, the usual reminders from myself. If you would, please do follow us on social media. We are on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And finally, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. Well, thank you, Tom from Little Triggers, for joining us on the Discover New Music podcast. How are you on this wet and windy afternoon?
I'm all right. I'm not too bad. It's a bit warmer than it was yesterday.
True.
I'm in my practice room and I've got my heater on, so I'm nice and warm today.
Excellent. Yes, it has been rather chilly lately, hasn't it? But yeah, no, obviously, delighted to have you on the podcast. We've really enjoyed Personality Crisis, your recent single, which we featured over on our Discover New Music playlist. Hence, we've got you onto the podcast. So before we talk about the single, we always start the podcast in the same way every single time. It's what we call the origin story. So the podcast is designed to introduce new listeners to new music. So for those that are checking this podcast out and perhaps don't know much about Little Triggers, how did the persona of Little Triggers, which I understand is more of a solo kind of project for yourself, how did that come about, and how did you get to this point?
It's a pretty long story, to be fair. I was in a band called the 45s when I was about 14, 15. Split up when I was 17 and I'd moved to Liverpool, and I got a new lineup together, and that morphed into Little Triggers, and that was a 5-piece, and then it turned into a 4-piece with completely new people, and that they went to China and stuff, and that was a bit more of an indie lineup kind of thing, and then went to a different 4-piece. And that's kind of when we started doing the blues rock kind of thing. It was a bit Led Zeppelin-y, and then it went to a 2-piece, and it went a bit more punky, and then now it's kind of a 3 or 4-piece depending on how I'm feeling.
Yeah, certainly been a bit of a long and winding road, to get you to the point where you are now. Certainly, probably some ups and downs in amongst it. And I did want to just touch on. Yeah, one individual that I think played a bit of a role with the first band you mentioned there, the 45s, was Wilco Johnson, obviously, who we've quite recently lost. So I just wanted to, bring him into it and obviously get your thoughts on the man and the help that he was able to give you.
Yeah, it was great. I met him at a gig in Kendal, and then I managed to get backstage, and he let me have a go on his guitar. We was just sat in the corner, and he could see me like staring at it. He was like, "Do you want to go?" And then I was playing all his songs back to him. And then we ended up supporting him in Glasgow, which is pretty cool. And a string on my guitar broke. And then they handed me his one, and I finished the set using his guitar. Yeah, it was very cool. And then he got up. We did a gig in Canvey Island as well, which is where he's from. And he got up and played, and it was packed, and it was great. We played with Sparko, the bass player, a couple of times as well from Dr. Feelgood. That was great. He still wishes me a happy birthday on Facebook every year, which is quite cool.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And, obviously wonderful memories, especially, at a young age, to be able to witness, people with the industry experience of, Wilco and be able to learn from them, I'm sure was really, really a big part of your sort of musical upbringing, I would guess. And obviously, he's very, very sad that is no longer with us, but we can certainly remember him for the great man that he was. So, this long and winding road you've been on has brought you to your current point where you've just put out Personality Crisis, your most recent single. So obviously we've really enjoyed it. As I say, it's on the playlist, so listeners can go there and check it out. And of course, it's on all the usual streaming platforms as well. What can you tell us about the song? What is the meaning behind the song, and how did it all come together for you?
I was listening to a lot of MC5 at the time, which you could probably tell in the track.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was about, I wasn't really much of a social media kind of guy until lockdown, and I thought I'd get the band's social media a bit bit better, and I got into it, and I just thought it was scary, really. The crap that's on there, like
Yeah.
people dancing on reels and stuff. I was like, I can't believe this is what people do. It's basically about being freaked out by social media, really.
Yeah, and I can certainly concur with that. Again, probably personal level, not really much of a social media user, but of course, for Full Pelt Music, this can find us as well as little triggers on all the social media, and we kind of these days you're kind of forced to do that almost. It feels like that's part of what you have to do
Yeah.
to be successful. Which obviously, I'm guessing for people like us isn't the most enjoyable side of it. So I mean,
No, I hate it.
yeah, I agree completely. So, if we focus on the better side, so it's the music, so as far as that track goes, how did the music come together for it?
I had that riff for the verse, and I quite like the idea of it being the one kind of riff, kind of like a Hive song where they just repeat the same thing over and over again. And so it kind of starts and then changes a little bit, and then in the chorus, it just goes to like just the chords of the riff, but it's the same three chords all the way through until the middle eight. It goes to a new chord and gives it a little break. But yeah, mainly inspired by the MC5. Like the last single, High Time, we did, I was listening to lots of MC5, and then lots of New York Dolls, which it shares the name of the song with one of their tunes. But yeah, wanted to do something quite punky and quite simple and to the point.
Yeah, and I certainly think it is worked on that point, definitely. And do you get that sense when you're writing music and obviously again, there's so much pressure these days through the social media, etc., of what you need to be able to put out as content. Do you instantly recognize a song such as Personality Crisis and think, oh yes, this is a single when you write it?
No, not really. It's mainly when we go into the studio with our producer Al. I'll have about 5 songs, and he'll pick the best bits and make one song. But with that song, it was, and High Time, to be fair, they're almost exactly the same as the demo. Kind of the punkier ones we do. Feed Me as well was just basically like the demo, just with a few, just tarted it up a bit.
Yeah, yeah. Add a few little bells and whistles, as you say.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, speaking of bells and whistles again, and obviously part of the package that we have to put out there these days. I always like to throw the focus as well on the music videos for the songs that were featured on the playlist because it's a bit of a lost art these days. But yeah, again the video for the song I think works really really well. Simple, performance yourself, but some really like fitting cool graphics around it. So just what were your thoughts on the video? How did that concept come together, and what how enjoyable was it to put that out there for you?
I made a video for it before that, but it had the old drummer in, so we had to get it done again, pretty rushed. And it was just a bit like I sent my video to the guy, and we just kind of tried to recreate that with just me, really. Just tried to make it quite energetic and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was about 50 takes, and I was really out of breath. But it was
Bless you. Yeah. No, it's always bittersweet recording these things if it is taking
yeah,
a lot of takes. But
I wore a roll
um
neck and a leather jacket as well, which is a terrible idea because I was just dying by the end of it.
exactly. Looks good, but probably not the most practical, as you say, come the
It
end
was
of
not.
it. But no, the video works really, really well. Listeners, obviously, you can go and check it out on YouTube. We'll have the link for it in the bio of the episode, so I encourage you to certainly go and check that one out. So, of course, this new music coming now follows on the footsteps of your debut album, which came out just before the pandemic hit.
Yeah,
Which is not the best time, looking back for bands to be putting any music out, let alone, their introduction, their debut. So, how frustrating was that period for you? I know there were some tour dates that got pulled as well because of obviously the pandemic. You've created something and you want to put it out there, but obviously, haven't been able to do that as you wished.
yeah, it was a bit annoying to stop playing completely. Um, yeah, and it was bad that we couldn't tour or anything. We did a tour that had just finished, like literally the 2 days before it was a lockdown. So we did manage to get quite a lot of good gigs in, but we did have stuff planned, and it was very slow getting back to normal. But yeah, we'll be touring in the new year, just back to it. So yeah, I got
Yeah.
lots of writing done and stuff, and made a page where I do Beatles covers and stuff. So I just kept busy recording at home, basically.
Yeah, and a lot of the artists I've spoken to over the last year or two now, have actually said the same. Incredibly frustrating that you couldn't proceed as planned, but it gave you unexpected free time to be able to do some more creative work. And a lot of bands have come out with albums and things that weren't actually planned, weren't in that long term plan as we talk about again. With the release schedules and everything. So. Obviously desperately terrible situation, the pandemic, but almost a silver lining for certain people was that opportunity. I don't know if you feel the same there.
Yeah, no, I'd never done home recording before, and now I've got like MIDI keyboards and microphones and speakers, and so I've got really into that, which is something I thought I'd never ever do, but I learned a new skill there, which I suppose was good.
Yeah, exactly. You've taken something away from it, and thankfully you've been able to get out and play shows as well since obviously the restrictions were lifted um, a year or so ago now. I suppose it still feels quite recent. Traumatized from the experience of it all, but musicians, we're back out. Live music's the thing again. So how did it feel for you getting back out and playing the first shows after that pandemic?
It was really weird. The first one we did was socially distanced,
Yeah.
and that was just crazy. It was still quite good, and we sold it out because there was only 30 tickets available, so it felt good to see the sold out thing, even though it was 30 people. But yeah, as the first few were weird, but it's like second nature now, really doing a gig, because I've been
Yeah.
playing in other bands constantly, so it just feels like normal now.
Yeah, no, thank God that live music is back. And yeah, thank God we aren't able to endure the socially distant shows. I did go to a few of those myself. I don't know what your feelings were with the atmosphere, but it was so awkward because you didn't know what you could do as someone in the audience, obviously as the band as well. You just didn't. It's a completely new, weird situation to be in, wasn't it?
Yeah, I didn't mind the table service at gigs rather than like waiting in a bar at a bar for like half an hour. I did quite enjoy that aspect.
Yeah, again, you always got to look on the bright side of life, and there's always good things to take. Definitely, definitely. And you've got lots of really good things coming in the future. You mentioned obviously shows coming in the new year. You got plans for a new EP as well, and you're going to be heading stateside. I believe you've got an appearance at South by Southwest lined up, hopefully as well. So just talk to us about the plans over the next year. What should listeners expect to see from you, and how excited are you for it?
Yeah, we'll be getting back in the studio and we'll be doing like an EP that will be continuing the kind of garage rock punk thing rather than the kind of bluesy stuff we were doing before. And yeah, we're going to the States to do something that I'm not really allowed to speak about at the minute, but it'll be in Nashville and it'll be very exciting, but I can't really divulge the information on it yet.
Yeah, no, well, we love a bit of secrecy because quite often the bands we talk to, have so much planned. And again, it all feeds into that machine of releasing music these days. And obviously, you have that schedule of when you can talk about things, when you can put news out there, to get obviously the most interactions and engagement with it. So again, we're going to go back to social media. We've talked about personality crisis. This part of the podcast is where I tell people where they can find you on social media, because of course that's how you stay up to date with anyone these days. So Little Triggers, you're on Instagram at Little Triggers, Facebook at Little Triggers Band, and for those people still on Twitter, you can find you at Little Triggers _. So with social media as well, reactions these days are instantaneous, and I know you said and I agree with you that I don't really like social media. But how tempting is it when you put out, for example, Personality Crisis, to track and monitor the comments and the views and everything coming back in? How in depth do you go with that?
I think it's good to keep on top of it from a like replying to people standpoint and stuff like that, but I don't really check, to be honest, how it does. Yeah, if it gets over 100, then that's fine,
Yeah,
and I might have to like add some hashtags or something, but I'm not really too fussed about it, to be fair.
good, and that's the right that's the right answer. It's the best way to live, really, because as the themes of personality crisis say. Some people just get far too involved, and it's a weird way to live, in my opinion anyway. So the next portion of the podcast is a regular feature that we call set list science. So I'm a bit of a set list geek. As a regular attendee of gigs, I love to see the efforts that bands have put into the structure of a set list and everything. So, the question for you is, how much attention do you pay to the structure of your set lists, and have you got any rules that you try to follow?
When we were the two-piece, me and the drummer had been playing together that long, we didn't have a set list. We just go on and do it. But I like to open with a few fast ones and then do our bluesier one, which is Loaded Gun. Then kind of go into the more rock opera-y ones that have got loads of bits and tempo changes, and then finish on a few faster ones, and then we do Burn Your House Down, which is kind of like the most sing-along one we do, and then finish. So quite simple, really.
Yeah, simple but effective, and it's that traditional kind of energy curve I sense there as well, which a lot of bands talk to me about. I say I'm a setlist geek, and I love asking that question on the podcast and getting the answers that we get. So the last main question really for you now is something we're doing in the new year. Obviously, we have Independent Venue Week coming up in February. So we're just asking everyone that we're interviewing before then to give a shout out to your favourite independent music venue. It can be more than one if you want, but where would you like to give a shout out to?
It was the Zanzibar, which was the place where basically everyone in Liverpool done their first gig. It was owned by someone called Tony, who sadly died, and then it got took over just before the pandemic, and they just launched it, and then the pandemic hit and it shut down. But now it's been bought by a chain and it's not independent anymore, but it's still a live venue. But it's that, I'd have to say, the Zanzibar.
Yeah, no, I'm at the other end of the country, but even I've heard of Zanzibar. Historically, very important independent venue for the scene in Liverpool, which of course is one of the best music scenes in the whole country. So yeah, no, definitely shout out to the Zanzibar in the past, and hopefully it's got a long and fruitful future. Much the same with Little Triggers. Hopefully the big future for the band coming up. So we've really enjoyed being able to chat through Personality Crisis, which again listeners can check out the video on YouTube. They can check out the song on our playlist or across all of the streaming websites. And yeah, big things coming in the future, so make sure you're following the band on social media. So Tom, thank you for joining us. What would be your final message for the listeners today?
I don't know, stay warm.
yeah that's definitely a relevant one at the minute, for sure. So no, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. I really do hope you enjoyed that chat there with Little Triggers. Make sure you check out their single Personality Crisis over on our Spotify Discover New Music playlist. And of course, follow the band on social media. You can also follow Full Pelt on social media. We're on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And if you would, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening, because we'll be back very soon with another episode of the Discover New Music podcast.